It goes without saying that after last week's magnificent episode of Made in Abyss, something that I still consider to be quite possibly the best episode in the entire franchise, all eyes were on this week in anticipation and waiting. How do you possibly follow up an episode like that into something even better and even more climactic to really start rounding out this arc in a powerful way? And the answer? You don't. You just don't. Hello everybody, I am Phenom Sage, and welcome back to another Made in Abyss Season 2, The Golden City of the Scorching Sun episode review. Today we will be talking about episode 11, the second to last episode of this season, Value. And I have to be clear that I was not one of these people expecting or anticipating this episode to be on the level of last week's. Last week's episode is the kind of anomaly you can only get when you have really talented, the best of the best people behind the scenes crafting what they know will be their most intensive episode. You can't just do that for every single episode of the season. There's just not enough time or enough of those wonderful talents like Takushi Koide to make that happen every single week. However, even in the context of this series overall, even in a bubble, disregarding the fact that we're coming off of that excellent episode last week, I still found this week's episode pretty weak in some critical areas, despite the fact that this should be one of the biggest climaxes of this entire arc. And if I had to sum up my issues with the episode in one word, it would be flow. The things that happen in this episode don't flow in a natural or organic way that all coalesce into this wonderful story that we waited a week to see. And while I did say that it doesn't hold up even in a bubble, I really think coming off of last week's episode, where everything in the episode does flow so beautifully, everything complemented each other, everything felt like it was feeding into the next thing and the next thing over and over again until you finally reach the ultimate payoff by the end of that episode. All of that was wonderful. Flow and structure and pacing was arguably the greatest strength of last week's episode, and now here, it feels like it's become the fatal flaw that's detracting a lot from the impact that these scenes could have had. For example, why immediately following this pivotal scene where Belaf sacrifices himself to Faputa and she's seeing the memories of his time with Irumyuui, why after a scene like that are we immediately cutting to Nanachi, giving this exposition dump about Wazukian? Why do we need to cut to the villagers' POV like 4 to 5 times throughout the episode just for these lengthy scenes where all they essentially say is, be careful guys, be careful, protect Riko, we're all going to die, be careful. Like, I got it, guys. I got it the first time, I really do. Same with Nanachi, just being this outside commentator on the things that are happening throughout the episode. Normally, all of these things, all of this stuff, wouldn't bother me this much, but it's the fact that all of it is happening in the midst of these really important and emotional scenes where they really should be given that time to breathe and let those emotions sink in. We don't need all of these unnecessary scenes truncating the flow and the pace of the important moments. It just never feels like all of the individual scenes that are good in this episode congeal into a satisfying whole, at least not for myself. It also illustrates some flaws in the execution as well, and this all comes down to what an episode director and a storyboard artist does, like I mentioned last week. They're in charge of how these scenes are constructed and transition into each other, and maybe the biggest scene in the episode that I really wish was executed on better was that scene where Belaf sacrifices himself to Faputa. This, with the context of the flashback and the knowledge of these characters, this is one of the most pivotal and emotionally climactic scenes of the entire season, and yet for some reason, I really found the execution here to be lacking. I just don't think the way the scene was put together visually really left as big of an impact as I think it could have in the right hands. But even disregarding that, even visually disregarding how I think it's a little bit flat, it also brings back another complaint that I've had since the flashback, which is if we actually got to spend more time with Belaf, if we fleshed him out a bit more, and more importantly, if we fleshed out that relationship with Irumyuui, this would be a goddamn tragic, emotionally charged scene that I probably would have cried at. I'm not even gonna lie. Because in this scene, we see in some brief flashback sequences that Irumyuui saw Belaf as a father in the same way that she saw Vueko as a mother. And that's goddamn news to me, man. I had no idea that she saw Belaf in that way, and I had no idea that Belaf possibly looked at her in that way either. So now I want you to think back to this episode and even back in those previous episodes and think about what that knowledge and what expanding on that relationship would have changed in terms of your emotional impact and connection to the things that are happening. For me, it would have impacted my perception of Belaf having a mental breakdown in the flashback when he learns that he's been eating her children, when he offers his life up to the village, when he sacrifices his life in this episode, when Faputa learns that she killed the man that her mother saw as a father. All of these potentially excellent, compelling conflicts and character drama that end up getting really underwritten because they just didn't have the time to flesh out that original backstory or the character dynamics. However, I know I've been pretty critical on this episode so far. What can I say? I'm just trying to lay out all of my thoughts here. But despite all of that, I did actually really like some parts of this episode as well, and I really like a lot of the concepts and themes that Akihito is bringing to full circle in this episode to give you the idea that we are reaching the end of this storyline. We are reaching the end of this entire arc. The biggest obviously being Faputa and the choices that she eventually has to make by the end of this episode. I never knew how wholesome and emotional a group cannibal scene could be, but that's just Made in Abyss for you, I guess. They turn these really horrific, grotesque, abstractly terrible things into really beautiful and transcendent conveyances of emotion and feeling, and bringing the whole story full circle, having the villagers offer themselves up to Faputa to eat and to live, mirroring Irumyuui and her children keeping the villagers alive, that really got me, I won't lie. That was a special moment, and I thought it was handled really well. The other thing about Faputa, though, that I've slowly come to realize over this arc is that this really is her story. And I know that might be like, no, duh, it's her story, but she is the main character of this season. Beyond Reg, Riko, Nanachi, Vueko, Irumyuui, Wasukiyan, beyond this extensive cast of characters, the Hollow Village arc really is centered on Faputa and her coming-of-age story, where she will eventually move on past this village into her own journey and her own adventure. And now, I am 100% convinced, after this episode, and after what Gabu says to her, that she will be joining our group into the descent to the bottom of the abyss. Faputa is a character who has had one goal and driving motivation her entire life. She says that even from the moment that she was born, she knew what she would eventually need to do. However, now that she's been confronted with this goal, now that she's both simultaneously accomplished and lost what she was trying to do, now is the point of her life where she needs to consider what she will do from here on out. What will be the new thing, the new Haku that pushes her forward? And the way they tie all of this into the value system and how she'll have to determine her own value from here on out, just all of that stuff I really liked. I do think that thematically this episode is really starting to bring this arc together in a really beautiful way, and I'm looking forward to the final episode and seeing what Faputa will end up doing. I really think the only remaining loose end from this arc is Wasukiyan. The man just abducted Vueko and dipped. We learn about this hypothetical plan to turn Riko into a second village that blesses all of them and prepares them to go deeper into the abyss. I don't even want to know why Wasukiyan thinks that'll work if he tries it a second time. The man is clearly not right in the head. I don't want to say that it's made me like him less as a character. I still think he's really cool. But just having that entire plan expo dumped by Nanachi in this episode really took away some of the mystery and intrigue behind his character, in my opinion. That being said, I'm still very interested in seeing what his role in the finale will be. I assume he has some kind of plan, Maybe we'll get a Reg and Faputa versus Wazuki battle. I don't know. I know that sounds a little bit overly shonen, but to be fair, in my defense, Made in Abyss isn't a stranger to going full shonen at times as well. I guess we'll have to see. Pour one out for Gabu, man. He was the realest interference unit in the series. I loved his role in this arc and in this episode a lot, just saving Faputa from Reg hating her, regretting that he won't get to see Faputa continue on her journey. I'm gonna make myself emotional again. Just let me know what you thought about this episode in the comments or the Discord server below. Let me know if you had my problems with it, if you think that they could have structured and executed on the stuff in this episode better, or maybe I'm just insane and this episode is actually even better than last week's. I'm open to hearing whatever your opinion may be. Thank you guys so much for watching. I love you, and I will see you in the next video.